News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Live. Now then, tonight we thought we'd talk to you about Sri Lanka's procrastination. The UN has finally caught up with Sri Lanka's procrastination, or it might be the other way around, that Sri Lanka has finally found that despite all their procrastination, the United Nations is simply unable to listen to them for much longer. And for the first time ever, the UN resolution is probably going to be mentioning economic crimes and corruption. The outgoing commissioner's report alludes to this corruption and mismanagement, the economic crimes, so to speak. To discuss this and a bit more, we have the Executive Director of the National Peace Council, Mr. Jehan Perera. No stranger to our program and to our network. Very good evening to you, Mr. Perera.
Good evening, Faraz.
Thank you very much for coming on our program. And first of all, I'd like to ask you, it looks like Sri Lanka is going to be, to use a sort of almost colloquial term, Sri Lanka is going to be hammered at the UN when it finally goes to, if it goes to the vote. I'm told that we may have less than 10 people supporting us. Is this all true?
Well, it certainly looks very possible that it will be that, because Sri Lanka has not done very much in terms of implementing the past promises that it has made, and that is what is being pointed out, that Sri Lanka promised at the last session of the UN Human Rights Council, where it actually withdrew from the previous resolution that it had co-sponsored in 2015. This was in 2019. It promised to come up with a homegrown process of reconciliation, but that is not in evidence at all. And now to add to that is what is happening at the present time. You know, the way the government has been dealing with the protest movement, which has actually evoked a lot of concern within the country itself, and not just human rights groups, but the political parties and even the business community. Everyone has been very concerned that what's happening in the country. And
John, what happens? It'll go to a vote if Sri Lanka doesn't accept. Is that how it works?
Yes, and I think Sri Lanka has said that they are not accepting it.
Yes, Mr. Sabri has made that clear.
And that has been the case on almost every occasion except for 2015 and 2017.
When we co-sponsored.
When we co-sponsored. But other than that, it has always gone to a vote. The first time it went to a vote, I think it was in 2009. Sri Lanka won at that time, because the war had just been won, and that the Sri Lankan government at that time promised that it's going to do various good things.
Indeed, that's part of that's going to be my next question to you. But all these things that the UN want us to do was previously agreed to by our own government. So it's actually our proposals that the UN would like to see implemented.
Yes, that is true. There's a lot of truth in what you say. I mean, maybe not everything was always
that's right,
agreed on.
Some things are added on as they went on.
But like for instance, in I think 2012, the UN asked us to implement the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission's recommendation, which our own government had appointed. President Mahinda Rajapaksa had appointed it. And yes, we said we would do it, and then we didn't do a thing about it. And then they came up with something harder. Every year the resolution is getting harder and harder, longer and longer and harder and harder, and this particular resolution is the hardest ever.
And of course Sri Lanka is never misses an opportunity to procrastinate, and so it looks like this procrastination has finally been caught up with by the judging by what may well be the final resolution.
Yeah, I think, and this this time it seems as if the government has really not paid too much attention to the UN. Maybe they feel that UN resolutions are always coming, but the country goes on and they go on. So they're not. I don't think they have taken it with the seriousness that they should have taken.
Perhaps they think that the UN will give them a break because there's this economic crisis going on, and that we are challenged for foreign exchange. We are challenged to buy the essentials needed for any economy. The people can hardly afford some of these food items. It's the situation is really fairly critical. You can see the minor crime figures going up, and the interest rates are sky high. Inflation is sky high as well, and some people say that up to 1 million people will be out of work. For a country like ours, that must be the ultimate disaster, isn't it?
Yes, and I agree, and I think that the international community, the foreign governments which have been supporting Sri Lanka, they are concerned about this, and they don't want to punish Sri Lanka. They don't want to punish the people of Sri Lanka. So I don't see them imposing any economic sanction on us. I even think that the European Union, which actually looks very carefully at the human rights situation, been giving their GSP plus, because the GSP plus is a gift they give to countries which are looking after the human rights of their people, which are making a genuine effort. They give this gift to us. Now, in our case, we are not doing such a great job of looking after the human rights of our people.
It's a bit beyond the
but I don't think that even the EU will withdraw their GSP plus, because they know it will hurt the people of this country. So I think the international community is now thinking, and I think it's manifested in this particular resolution, they're thinking how can they have an impact, because they don't want this type of impunity where a government comes and says we'll do this, we promises this, and then just it kind of ignores everything once it goes away.
Well, exactly.
So it sets a bad example for other countries, and it erodes the credibility of the UN Human Rights Council itself. So I think that's why this time they're targeting individuals. That is the difference this time.
Well, perhaps that's a good move. If it's going to make a difference, anything that's going to make a difference is probably a good move. It's just like the people welcomed the appointment of Ranil Wickremesinghe as the Prime Minister and then thereafter as the President, because they felt, I suppose, that here's somebody who heeded the call of the then President and came forward and said, right, I'll take it on. And, you know, he's done that. But I think people have now they're now feeling that they're back at square one, back at base, basically. You know, whatever the Aragulia peaceful protesters achieved in terms of change has now gone by the window. Do you agree that it may have gone out the window?
Yes, the protests led to the change of government leadership. The President had to step down, the Prime Minister stepped down, the Minister of Finance stepped down, and then the Cabinet itself stepped down. But now the Cabinet is back again. Almost the same people are back again, except that the President has changed. And and the problems of the people remain. And in effect, what has happened is that there is a certain stability at this time, but the stability is at half the income that we had. Most people who were, as you rightly pointed out, who were living at the margins previously have now fallen below the margin. Of course, at the moment these are not visible. What is visible are the lines, the queues, and there are no queues today. So people who can afford to pay that extra money and eat well are doing it, and for them, for those of us, life is back to normal. But it must be terrible for those who were struggling to make ends meet before, and we can imagine that there will be a social movement gathering strength beneath, which may be also why the government is consistently arresting people.
Absolutely.
to remind people that, you know, if you want to protest, it's very dangerous.
And
you'll
now
be targeted.
Sri Lanka seems to have gone to some sort of Stalinistic era of gulags and so on, with this announcement that we're going to be having something called the Bureau of Rehabilitation. That is, you know, this is all part of, I believe, that there is a strong possibility that this is part of the government recognizing all those things that you've just said, the difficulties faced by the public at large, that the public are bound to have no other option but to voice their concern by spilling out onto the streets. And they tried this high security zone business, that's been rescinded apparently, and now they have this almost draconian piece of legislation, which is this Bureau of Rehabilitation. And we're supposedly living, we are an emerging economy, and we are supposedly living in a robust democracy.
Yeah, what is actually scary about that bureau is that it permits people to be sent for rehabilitation administratively, not through a judicial process where the people are then shown to have violated the law or being ready to commit some terrorist act or something like that, and then you are punished. But here, a group of bureaucrats can decide to commit you for rehabilitation, and then you're put away for a year or two. So but I think that it will not pass muster in the courts of law, and I think that's the reason why the president revoked the high security zone gazette. I'm hopeful that also this may signify a change of approach even on his part, where instead of trying to deal with these problems through repression, by arresting people, by frightening people, you try and address the root of the problem. You go, and the root of the problem is that there has been a huge fall in people's income because of that crisis and the dollar shortage. And so there should be more targeted assistance given to those who are poor. Foreign countries have actually been helping us. I saw that, you know, the UK, the US, Australia, Japan, they're giving targeted assistance meant for poor people, poor people.
For the vulnerable.
Yes, so they're doing that. And now these are the very countries that in the UN Human Rights Council are leading the campaign against Sri Lanka. So, but it shows you that they are not against the people of this country. They are against a government system that practices impunity. Impunity towards us, the citizens, and impunity to the international community also, saying one thing and doing quite another different thing, or not doing it at all.
But the irony of all this is that whilst the people are being the biggest sufferers, if you like, the greatest impact is on the people of Sri Lanka, whilst that's going on, and we are receiving targeted is the key word here, targeted humanitarian assistance to help the vulnerable in our society. Whilst all that is happening, the politicians continue to live their political way, which is they've got these big cars, and you know, we don't see visibly any cuts in their lifestyle, in their political lifestyle, and all they can appear to muster is this Bureau of Rehabilitation. What on earth really, Jehan Perera, what on earth is going on amongst our legislators?
You know, they seem to be wanting to keep their places, keep their lifestyles, and therefore, you know, keep the people suppressed, because if you want to uplift the people, somewhere we have to shift resources. So maybe we have to shift, if we want to shift resources away from the 37 ministers and all their staff and their vehicles, then their lifestyles go down. They don't want to do that.
But they have to be absolutely shameless to have even accepted that position, because the country is in such dire straits and we really can't afford any of this at all. Sri Lanka is in a real economic crisis, and perhaps the only way out is for the international lending agencies, the IMF, the World Bank, the ADB, and everybody else in between, to insist on something called the political donations laws, which Sri Lanka seems to be missing. We'll come back to you on that one after this break. We'll see you on the other side.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.
Newsfirst headlines. Main sponsor.
Anka ege arakshita itigini petti. Surya gini petti.
Why can't diesel prices be reduced?
ඩීසල් සඳහා ඇත්තටම අලාභයක් නැහැ. රුපියලක පමණ දැන් අපිට ලාභයක් තියෙනවා. නමුත් අපිට රුපියල් 10කින් 15කින් අඩු කරන්න බෑ.
Worsening farmers' issues.
කනකර රත්තරන් බඩු වේනකොට උගස් තියලා. දැන් නැත්තර නැති වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
Former president joins a protest. Who was excluded from the Committee on Public Enterprise?
යටි මඩි ගහපු අය, හොරකම් කරපු අය, වැරදි ආර්ථික තීරණ ගත්ත මිනිස්සු ඔක්කොම සමාජයට කෝප් කමිටුවේ ගත්ත තීරණ එක්ක තරහෙන් ඉන්න ඇති.
Who are the bond scam culprits?
විශේෂයෙන්ම ඔබතුමාලා පෞද්ගලික කාලේ චෝදනා කරේ රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මහත්තයා මේකට ඍජුව වගේ කියන්න ඕනේ.
අධිකරණය විසින් රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මහතුමා මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් චෝදිතෙක් බවට පත් කළා නැහැ.
The police sergeant who prevented a robbery promoted.
Newsfirst headlines. Main sponsor.
Anka ege arakshita itigini petti. Surya gini petti.
A trusted place for your fixed deposit. Valuable FD. 25% for 2 months. 25.5% for 4 months. Valuable FD. The symbol of stability. Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. My guest this evening is Mr. Jehan Perera, who is of course the Executive Director at the National Peace Council. We were talking about, just as we came into the break, about the need to have laws to control political donations or campaign finance. This is where politicians receive money from those who believe that they need to be supported financially. But of course, do you believe that this is one point, one sort of the Achilles heel, if you like, where of the system, that this is the point where corruption really comes onto its own?
Yes, especially given our current political system, where it's based on large electorates, the district, and politicians require a lot of money to campaign. It's not as if it was a small electorate like it was in the past, then they might not need so much to win. But here they need a lot, because big district, million people, they need to reach those people. So then they need money to reach them, and then they need to go to business people or whoever can donate to them. And
but
then
this is all black money.
Yes, so
because mainly it's black money, because shouldn't we have a system similar to, I only use Singapore as an example because quite often you hear people say, oh, you know, these politicians say, we will make Sri Lanka like a Singapore. The people in Tangol heard that from somebody called Mahinda Rajapaksa, who went on to become the president not once but twice. And he did the same with being the Prime Minister. And he told his electorate that we are going to turn this into a Singapore. If you go to Tangol, I'll tell you what, it's nowhere near Singapore. But don't you think, Mr. Perera, that, or let me put it another way, why is it that these international lending arms, like the World Bank, like the IMF, the ADB, why can't they say, look, you guys are right down the bottom of the pile now. We are going to tell you what we'd like to see happen. We want you to start introducing laws controlling political donations. Why can't they say that? The IMF talks about corruption. The UN talks about economic crimes and corruption, and they may well put it in their resolution. But why can't they be upfront and open and tell the Sri Lankan government where to get off? And where to get off is eradicate this corruption, because we can't stand it, because your people are the ones who are suffering.
Yeah, I think they are moving in that direction. I think for the first time we
are they
found
on a slow boat to China? Do you know?
The IMF did speak of corruption vulnerabilities in relation to Sri Lanka.
Yes.
I mean, these lending agencies don't want to get into the internal structures of a country.
Unfortunately, it is they who are finally footing the bill, because they are sending humanitarian aid targeted. Why targeted? Because if not, they have, obviously, one of the considerations is they have no confidence that this aid, humanitarian as it is, will actually get to the people of the country without some corruption happening on the way. Don't you think that's one of the reasons? This is targeted. We're going to give it to them, and them.
Yes, it looks like that very much, but of course that itself might not prevent money being siphoned out. It's very difficult to stop that.
Yeah.
But I think I agree with you that our laws need to change. But in addition to our laws changing, the people who implement those laws must also be honorable people, because you can have good laws, but if you have dishonorable people, they will pervert the good laws.
Well, look at what happened to that poor chap, Shani Abesekra. He's put hundreds of people before courts of law, and then he finds himself, he is an accused, and so on. I felt rather sorry for him giving a speech, I think yesterday. And look at his lot, and he was only trying to do his job.
Yes, it is also very sad that the government he served and the leaders of the government he served did not speak up for him when he was in trouble. That also is very unfortunate, and that is one of the reasons why people in our country are afraid to stand up for what is right and proper. But secondly, I also think the need for anti-corruption also shows the need for strong institutions, strong and independent institutions, which are not hand-picked by the leader, by the president, by the government. And that was something that the 17th and 19th amendments tried to do. We were moving in that direction, but they were always reversed by those who wanted to pervert that system. And they brought in the 18th and 20th amendment to undermine that system, and that's why we have got to where we are now. So in future, I think it's very important to, when appointing people to oversight bodies, to checks and balances, institutions of checks and balances, that they should be appointed in a collegial manner by government, opposition, and civil society, and business community. They must get together and choose the people, not just one side only choosing the person.
Talking about that, we had Professor Charita Herat, who was apparently doing a pretty good job as the chairman of COPE. He's been left out this time round. And if you look at the composition of that, I'm sorry, but several people in that committee have had their integrity questioned. And if you go back to the central bank, John Exter said that nobody should be the governor of the central bank if their integrity had ever been questioned. And that might be a super rule of thumb to do when it comes to these oversight committees, that they must be, because not all 225 are bad, and not all 225 have matters against them or allegations, so on. Some of them, there are people with their integrity intact. But look at this new composition, and it is an absolute crying shame, and it goes against everything that we've been talking about today, about asking, and the UN themselves calling and talking about structural reform to avoid corruption.
And what you said answers the question of why we are going to do so badly in Geneva before the UN Human Rights Council, because we are not delivering on the ground in our country, and the government has not delivered on human rights, on corruption, as we had promised, and on good governance. So till that happens, we will have problems with the international community. We will lose out on the assistance that they are happy to give us. They want to help us. But when giving money to Sri Lanka, they have to go to their own parliaments and taxpayers, and they will say, but why should we give money to a country whose rulers
are rubbing us blind?
Yes, something like that, yeah.
It's very sad. Do you think that we can safely, or that the international community may safely describe Sri Lanka as an international basket case, like Henry Kissinger did about Bangladesh all those years ago?
Yeah, maybe at this time, but as you say, we should not be too downcast, because Bangladesh, which was called a basket case, has now done very well.
Absolutely. They even gave us a little bit.
And I think that we are a smaller country. We are very strategically placed in the Indian Ocean. We have an educated population. Yeah, so
I want to just add a little bit there. An educated population that are fast leaving our shores, judging by what we saw earlier at the passport office, the queues to get passports. They're all fed up. They're going. You know, we had all sorts of educated people who left us, and
I know it's sad, because that is the true wealth of the country. The human beings, the human capital is what makes everything work properly, and we are losing that. But as I said, if we get our systems right, if our leadership leads us in the right direction, I think we can very quickly come out of the sorry situation we are in.
Do you think the people of Sri Lanka will be waiting, rather like waiting for Godot? Do you think they just wait and never come? Because we've 74 years since we've become masters of our own destiny. Where are we today? We're bankrupt.
I think maybe we might have to wait till the next election to
when do you think that'll
the
be?
change. That
you got a minute. When do you think that'll be? Do you think the president will call for elections soon after? Because that is the call of the moment, isn't it? People are actually fed up, and they're saying, look, we need to have elections. When you say, well, we don't have money, they say, well, they can print some, because they've been printing it for everything else. So why not a bit more for this? When do you think the elections will come?
I mean, I think elections should come soon. There is a possibility that the president gets the power to dissolve parliament next February. So there is a possibility that that might happen. But on the other hand, political self-interest might dictate that it will not happen, and that this present situation will continue. So in which case we have to wait for another 2 years.
Do you think the people will be sufficiently frightened by this Bureau of Rehabilitation so that they'll just stay at home and be quiet, like the Silence of the Lambs?
Well, the Sri Lankan polity has been a very volatile one, and we have seen the volatility both in the Sinhala society and in the Tamil society. So it's going to be a difficult situation, but we all know that if we go on the path of violence, it doesn't improve things.
Well, we have
things
33 years of experience to know that.
So I hope we don't take that path of violence, and that there'll be a non-violent resistance movement.
The only silver lining that I can see is the constant assurances by the governor of the central bank, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, that things may well turn around by the end of this year. So that's some hope that we can hang on to.
And we also have a president who's a very educated man.
Yes, indeed.
Who's very educated, very experienced. We have to ask him, we have to appeal to him, we have to hope that he will do the right thing.
Ranil Wickremesinghe, can you fix it? But Jehan Perera, thank you very much for being on Newsline Live. We've run out of time. It's now time for the primetime news. And as always, have a great week ahead of you, and God bless you all.